Hi there. My name is Josh Thompson, and this is a recorded talk. It's kind of weird to record a talk like this. Usually, when I work with people, I get to be in the same room or at least in some synchronous communication, and there can be conversation and back and forth and questions and hopefully sometimes laughter and all of those things. But we're in the middle of a pandemic, so everything is different. I so wish I could go to RailsConf. I've never been before. And so hopefully next year we'll all get to be together. And yeah, so the reason I mention all of this is because this is not my first time recording this talk and sharing it. I normally, when I give a talk, the moment I'm done, and I've only done a couple of them, so I'm not very good at it, but the moment I'm done, I think of all the things I could have done better. But now, because I'm recording the talk, if I don't like how it went, I can just throw it all away and do it all over again. That can become very time-consuming very quickly. So we're going to do what all great developers do. And any bugs that arise in the rest of this talk, I'm simply going to say it's a feature. Sound like a plan? Because I know none of us have ever done that. If there's an audience, that would be a great point to laugh. If there's no audience, there's no laughter. Okay, we're going to be talking about junior developers, and I'm arguing that they're the solution to many of your problems. Now, this is a bold premise, and I don't expect many or most of you to agree with me now, but I hope that in the next 15 minutes or so, we'll kind of converge on something where we both broadly agree with this statement. I'll have these notes or these slides and other notes on my website, josh.works/RailsConf. That is a website, .works. So you can just punch that into an address bar and you'll go there. And then that's me on Twitter. And there'll be other notes from this as we go. Okay, so who am I? Before I got into software development in 2017, by way of Turing, so hello, all of you Turing people out there, I spent a lot of years in customer-facing roles, specifically for business-to-business, software-as-a-service applications. That informs a lot of how I see the world and do my work today as a software developer, doing like sales and customer support and customer success. When the website broke, I was the one that would answer the phone for the angry customers, and at the time, I had no idea what was going wrong. So I've got a lot of empathy and respect for people in customer-facing roles. And I think software developers are also generally safe to be loosed on customer-facing roles. So I've been working on Ruby and Rails ever since 2017, and I love it. And then lastly, I love to figure out how knowledge transfer actually happens. It's a weird thing. We'll talk about it later. Okay, so software development industry on junior developers generally has a specific thing to say. There's lots of different ways that they say it, but at the end of the day, they say, we don't know. They say things like, we don't know how to handle junior developers, or our industry or our company is too advanced to be able to employ junior developers. We're trying to change the world. We don't have time to be altruistic to junior developers, or it's somebody else's problem. So I think the word junior is unhelpful, and I'll talk about the rest of those attitudes as well. But first, I want to address the word that I've scare quoted here, junior. I think it's a little pejorative. So what I would rather than be called is, this is not a term I came up with, someone else did, but early career software developers, or the very easily pronounced ECSD. I'll be calling them early career developers for the rest of the talk. So our updated title is Early Career Software Developers Are the Solution to Many of Your Problems. Now, why is an early career software developer this thing that we're talking about? Like, what is it? Why am I choosing this phrase instead of a different one? Maybe a new developer, or just a developer, or there's lots of different ways that you could get to this. So the reasons I'm going with this phrase is rooted in a couple different places. Like I mentioned, I wasn't the one that coined it. I was Patrick McKenzie, Patio11 on the internet. And then I read a couple of papers. And this phrase, early career software developer, I think gracefully links some of the core pieces of these three papers that we're going to talk about. So I like to print out papers and then just like take a pen and sit outside on the porch on a pleasant day and just read through them. So we'll be talking about these 3 papers. First, Structural Holes and Good Ideas by Ronald Burt from 2004. He basically argues that persons that span structural holes inside of organizational maps provide disproportionately good ideas. So all that means is people that are rooted in different domains or different business processes or different business units. Basically, anyone whose knowledge spans between uncommonly spanned domains has a lot of value to bring. So I'm now quoting from the abstract. The whole paper is worth reading. It'll be on the website. But he says, persons connected across groups are more familiar with alternative ways of thinking and behaving. It's not shocking. That's not a bold premise. But it means that your early career software developers are possibly early career, mid-career, or very experienced in other domains. I know people that span many different industries that have gotten into software development, and some of them have been wildly competent experts in their domains before getting into software development. And so when we sit down, I'm like, I'm not worthy. You're the expert here. They're so much better at their field than I am at software development. These kinds of people, really all of the people that are switching careers into software development have intrinsic value, or they could have intrinsic value to your organization simply because they span domains. Okay, next. The 2 Sigma problem. The search for methods of group instruction as effective as one-on-one tutoring. Benjamin Bloom, 1984, him and some other folks on his team put together this paper that said with a certain set of interventions, individuals in experiencing whole group instruction between like 1 person and 30 students could experience 98th percentile or 2 standard deviations. That's where the 2 Sigma comes from. 2 standard deviations results better than their cohort without those interventions. So imagine that you got a early career software developer that was the top 2% of early career software developers. And if you think that you would hire that person, I want you to think of, we'll talk more about that. But basically, if that person is appealing and could be successful in your organization, there's a bunch of interventions and methodologies that could make almost anyone that's successful inside your organization. Next, lastly, is this paper from 2004 titled The Psychological Conditions of Meaningfulness, Safety and Availability, and the Engagement of the Human Spirit at Work. I don't know who helps scientists come up with titles, but it's not the same folks that work at BuzzFeed. This is a really important paper for a bunch of different reasons. Basically says that if you treat people well and with dignity and treat them like they're valued and independent persons, a lot of really good things happen. So highly engaged people at work do really good work. The literature is settled on this. There's no question. That's why companies do employee engagement surveys. All of them are trying to figure out, are our employees engaged, and help them become more engaged. And the things that we're going to talk about will help kind of like reinforce these ideas. None of it's rocket science. So here, reading from the end of this page 33 under a section titled Implication for Management. They have things like managers should also work to establish employee perceptions of safety by developing supportive, trustworthy relations with their employees. Now, that seems reasonable and dare I say obvious, but the reason I'm mentioning these 3 papers is because later on, or actually I'll just jump to that now, I'm not talking only to one group of people. I hope that persons watching this span at least 3 different domains. The executives, so that might be CEOs, CTOs, VPs of engineering, directors of engineering, and then experienced developers or engineering managers. So these would be just but the experienced engineers that would be then working with early career software developers. And then of course the early career software developers themselves. All 3 of these people have different sets of problems and solutions and constraints about getting organizational buy-in. And what I would like to do is, if at any point while you're listening to this, you're like, oh, those are like, that stuff that Josh is saying is interesting, and it would be maybe nice to implement in my organization or get someone at my organization to care. The reason I mention all of these papers is because these kinds of things, it's nice to be able to say, for instance, if you have to go to your CFO and get approval for funding for something, to not just say, like, we're treating our employees, we're spending money and treating them better just because it's the right thing to do, which it is. But you could pull something like this, and you could say, like, the literature from 2004 says if we can create these kinds of conditions, we get way better work. And so it's actually financially responsible for the organization to do something like that. So that's why I'm mentioning the papers. Now, we're going to find the right problems. We're going to talk about that. And then we're going to talk about the kinds of like how to identify solutions that relate to those problems. And then there's a very important third piece, which is often forgotten, is how to get organizational buy-in. And most good ideas don't proceed to implemented ideas because of a lack of buy-in. And so this isn't something that you should necessarily even do in sequence, like find a problem, then identify a solution, and then get organizational buy-in. I'll argue down the road that these should all happen in parallel and in mutually reinforcing ways. So, carrots and sticks. The carrot for this, if you find what we're talking about to be compelling and take action on it and are successful and not like overly constrained by, the constraints that we're all constrained by, you'll have more, like the things that are important to you will go up and to the right. So that looks like maybe like money, or feature delivery, like the rate of feature delivery, or the defect rate, like regressions and stuff, that'll go down. So things you care about will go up, and things you want less of will go down. You'll have more of what you want. And you'll have lots of like good feelings. Like people will feel dignified and whole and seen and appreciated. And all of those are really good things. So whoever figures this out first is going to outperform their cohort. Or whoever figures out how to take action on this is going to outperform their cohort. So if you're an executive, you're familiar with the Gartner's Magic Quadrant. And if your organization gets to take action on this, it will probably move up and to the right in Gartner's Magic Quadrant relative to other companies in your industry. If you're a senior developer or a manager, you'll outperform other persons who have that same job title in similar industries and organizations of similar sizes. And then if you're an early career software developer, you should keep listening, because with this knowledge, you can shape your own experience inside of an organization to the benefit of everyone. Now, the stick, I couldn't find a good stick or branch emoji, and it wasn't for lack of trying, is whoever figures this out last is going to underperform their cohort. So there's going to be this group of early adapters, and then there will be more people, and then whoever is kind of here on the back is going to have, like, trend lines are going to go down, and unhappy feelings will be had. So hopefully you'll feel motivated, and it's not like listen to this talk and then do something dramatically different next week. Like, these kinds of things take time, but we'll talk about that. And with time and effort, surprising things can be accomplished. Surprisingly substantial things can be accomplished. Okay, finally, just a reminder, all of these papers that I mentioned, you can find links to them on my website, josh.works/RailsConf. If you want to leave comments or questions, you can do so there. And then I'll be in the Discord channel, which shares the title of this talk, Junior Devs Are the Solution to Many of Your Problems. And I would love to see you there. It just feels so different than getting to talk with people, which I kind of miss. So come say hi in the channel. It'll make me feel better. Okay. Like I said, we're going to talk about problems. So we don't just want to start with problems. We also want to think about the solutions. And there's a bunch of traits of good solutions. And then, like I said, we're talking about organizational buy-in. Now, I want to because we have to dual track all of these at the same time, we'll talk about how the solution pairs with the buy-in, and then kind of all of this can be had at once. So the right solution, probably in the context of this, of like how to get value and have a lot of success with early career software developers, probably means at minimum that your experienced developers are going to occasionally be working intentionally with early career software developers. I hope that's not a stretch, but there are teams where that kind of thing is verboten, not sure how to pronounce that, or even how to spell it. But it's not celebrated. The reason I say that is because of this paper, Two Sigma Problem. Experienced developers working with early career software developers is pretty close to one-on-one tutoring. It's very close. It increases the capacity of the entire team. So the traits of these good problems are when solutions increase the capacity of the entire team, not just one person. And they tend to take time up front, but the right solution should pay off fairly quickly. So, like I said, increases the capacity of the entire team, not just in the present time or present like slice of time, but should be something that can go forward and help future team members. Talk about that. And of course, it should pay off fairly quickly. So the right solution would also, of course, have upfront investment, but meaningful returns. If you don't see meaningful returns and others don't see meaningful returns, you're not going to be very successful getting organizational buy-in. So our hypothetical example, not saying I've heard this ever spoken by anyone I've ever interacted with, but who hasn't heard this? Junior developers take too long to onboard. People say it's going to take you 3 to 6 months to, really be hitting the ground running with this organization, and junior developers just take too long, and we're too agile, and we need to move too quick. So let's run this particular pain point, which I'm actually thankful for this pain point, because a lot of times people will feel kind of this nebulous discomfort around the idea of hiring just like a interchangeable junior developer from and like a software development program. There's a bunch of different ones. I graduated from Turing. I really like it. But there's a lot of different programs, or someone just doing the self-taught journey. It feels like there's this gap, and people kind of just say it's onboarding. Like if I hire that person, it's going to take too long. So let's work through an example of this, the premise of this talk, which is junior developers are the solution to your onboarding woes. And we're going to talk about how the 3 different groups of people, so executives, experienced engineers or developer managers, and then early career software developers themselves can like work together to solve this problem. So time to onboard. First, what is your time to onboard? This, if we're all in person, I would say, shout it out. How long does it take from someone getting access to the Git repository and pushing their first ticket to production and deploying their first ticket? Some people might say a week. Some people, usually the larger the organization, the longer that time is. So a couple of weeks. It was, for my first job, it was a couple of weeks, probably before I was deploying code. So this isn't just a problem for junior developers that it takes a long time to onboard. It's a problem that we all face. And organizations that have a really long time to onboard, if they get a senior developer, it's going to take that senior developer longer to onboard at that organization than it would take that same developer to onboard at an organization with a smoother process. So, of course, the same is true for early career software developers. So let's solve this problem with early career software developers. And we're going to talk about MVP, which is minimum viable buy-in. So before you're going to solve this problem, you're going to have to get people from a couple of different people on your team to agree that it's a problem and worth solving, and to work towards that solution. So a lot of people see organizational buy-in as like a barrier to implementing good ideas. And someone wrote a book called like The Obstacle is the Way. I don't know if it's a good book. I don't think I've read it, but the title really lands. Getting buy-in is probably your best path to implementing anything that you might want to implement as a result of this talk, or really any of the other talks here at RailsConf. I would start with figuring out how to get buy-in. And if you can't get buy-in, there's a bunch of things you can do, but aim for buy-in. So there's a bunch of critiques people might raise, like, we don't have time, or, we'll do it later. Our engineers are working too fast on other things. So what I might recommend is sit down with the other powerful person relative to this issue. So that might, if you're a line level engineer, that might look like talking with the manager or the CTO, or kind of whoever is one or two links above you in the food chain, not the food chain. The organizational structure. That was a little dark. Or if you're at the top of that structure and you're trying to draw your team into this direction, talk with the team lead or one of the engineers that's running the team. So for instance, you could say, if you're an executive, the medium to long-term health of our company requires us to keep hiring, and if we can only hire senior talent, we'll always be hurting. Let's see if we can start making the engineering teams friendlier to less experienced engineers. It's likely some of our engineers would be happy to take some of this work on because they're already doing it, and we will reward them for it. If I was one of the line level engineers in that organization, I heard that, I'd be like, oh, this is cool. These are things I'm already good at and inclined to do, so I'll just do a little bit more of that. So we will use early career software developers to improve the onboarding. Now, what would be a good benchmark for a good onboarding metric for someone joining your team? This would be another opportunity that I would kind of turn it over to the audience and start hearing people kind of popcorn things off. I've heard someone say you should be able to go from git clone to running tests within 5 minutes. Sounds really nice. Let's see, maybe you should be able to have access to development staging, all access to the different environments, and be able to add your own profile picture to the meet the team page within 10 minutes, for instance. Sometimes it's just a matter of a YAML file, and you add you add an image, you link the image in the YAML file, you give the little bio there, and then you git push, deploy, and now the new person is there. So if you could hire an engineer, and by the end of that first day, they have changes in production, that's really good. On the flip side, there are organizations that have very complicated and slow release cycles. So those organizations are probably they have more to benefit from this kind of work than those that can just do it effortlessly. So how might we create a roadmap to let early career software developers improve your onboarding process? So again, you're an executive or a seasoned engineer on a team, and you're wondering, can I go hire an early career software developer? I'm going to say yes. So here's what that looks like. First, create a ticket in Jira or Trello or GitHub Issues, however you track your work. Create a ticket that says, or an epic, it all depends on your preferences, and that says something about improving the onboarding process, and assign someone to it. You probably already have someone in mind to assign to this ticket. It's either you, or the person on the team that tends to do the onboarding work. When you add someone to the team, they volunteer, they're helpful in the Slack channel, they already kind of garden the README or setup instructions, that person, assign the ticket to them. The benefit of creating a ticket is it makes the effort legible at an organizational level. And that's very important for this buy-in piece, because it's should be free or cheap to make a small ticket and pull it into the sprint or the current body of work. Like people aren't gonna. Usually, you can get enough overhead to do that. But as you then move the ticket through, you can refer to it later, or once it's closed, you can just kind of keep building on that foundation, and then you can. Well, we'll talk about some of the other things that you can do with it. But I would recommend making the efforts legible to the organization, and Jira tickets or issues are a pretty good way of doing that. So next, the experienced engineer, or whoever that person was that I said you probably have in mind, does the setup, like rebuilds the application on their computer from as scratch as possible. So that might look like making a new directory in their users folder and doing git cloning stuff and then running the commands as instructed in the README. Often when you do this, you'll find some spots where there's gaps in the instructions. And you should fill them. So there's, as a byproduct of this, there should be at minimum a pull request to the README of the primary application or the primary repository of your application or collection of applications that improves some of the information around onboarding. It might be looking like a list of the other applications that the engineer should also make sure that they clone down. Maybe a place that they can go for getting like secrets and all the like config setup that they'll need that isn't in the Git repository. But out of this will come a pull request with some notes that clean up the entire process. You've already read this whole slide. I'm sorry for violating the rules of making good slides or just having a lot of text on it. So next, when you hire a new engineer, this doesn't even have to be an early career engineer or an early career software developer. Just the next time someone joins that team and has to run that app locally, pair that engineer should pair with them. You could create a second ticket, link it to the first whenever that could happen, days, weeks, months later, and then that engineer that has an idea of what's in the guide should pair with the new engineer, because that new engineer isn't going to have the same stuff set up. Like maybe they don't even have Ruby installed on their computer. So now you're doing RVM or RBEM. I can't even pronounce it. But you'll like keep finding little gaps in the process, and then that new engineer themselves can make the pull request that fills in those gaps. And now the guide has gone through 2 iterations. First, an expert who's already on the team has improved it, and then they've kind of battle tested it with a new engineer. And then finally, when you're ready to hire an early career software developer, that process should work pretty well. And you can use that early career software developer to refine it for one last time. Because once you go through that process and an early career software developer can make the whole thing work, like now you could just add anyone to the repository and know that within a certain unit of time, they'll be able to get it up and running. Now, you might have a complicated enough setup that it's a lot of work to get it this easy. Like maybe an engineer will have to Dockerize the whole application, or you'll have to create a good enough seeds file whole cloth from scratch. I've sometimes had to clone down obfuscated or development data from a staging environment into a local environment to populate the database schema, because we didn't have any seeds at the time. So that that slows it down, and you could use an early career software developer to start building out some of that seed data. There's opportunities to say, oh, you ran into a problem onboarding, let's pair with an expert and figure out how we can make this smoother for the next person. So the possible wins. What would come from doing something like this? First, at an organizational level, you would be stating to your team and everyone watching the team that we care about the onboarding process. And as Peter Drucker said, I think it was him, God of management theorizing, says what gets measured managed, I think. So if you're tracking this kind of stuff on a Jira ticket, it'll start doing better just because you're attending to it. You'll improve the infrastructure around your application. So that means deleting old and outdated instructions and adding good and new instructions. You'll get better resiliency around the data sets that you're using. I've often run into problems with like seeding, or sometimes you run into problems seeding just data into the database, and the process of resolving that actually has a bunch of beneficial trickle-down effects for others. And maybe you get a couple of early pull requests from your new engineers. And if your early career software developers normally take 3 weeks to make their first pull request, and under this effort, they're taking a week and a half to make their first pull request, you're cutting down the time to first value by half, or time to first value. So find someone on the team to keep an eye on this metric. It doesn't have to be you. If you're a manager or a senior engineer or an executive, you probably have a lot on your plate, and you're not just like casting about for one more thing to keep an eye on. But I would propose that I bet that there are people on your team that would really enjoy keeping an eye on this. And this would be like an easy way for them to create value and contribute in a new way. And then they can report on it. Maybe on stand-ups it comes up, or like every time a new hire is made, someone talks about this, and now that new hire is kind of brought into an environment where they're told, when you experience friction, it's not that you're deficient, it's that we want to fix this and make it better and, squeeze learning opportunities out of it. So if a senior engineer cuts their onboarding time from 4 days to 2 or 4 days to 1, an early career software developer might cut their onboarding from like 2 weeks to 1 week. And that's a lot of payroll. That could be like, depending on your all-in costs, that could be a couple grand in payroll. Conservatively, $3,000 per engineer saved in onboarding time. And in addition to there's a bunch of other benefits, like these extensions. So I talked earlier about having a minimum viable buy-in, and usually onboarding and trying to make it a better process is not too large of a leap. So what you can do is start working on the onboarding piece, and then as you start getting some wins, kind of tack on some extensions and just kind of keep pushing that thread as far as you can. And eventually you might find yourself becoming a very welcoming place to early career software developers. So what are these extensions? Next time you onboard an engineer, just think about what needs to happen between them getting access to the private Git repo and running, git clone and rake db setup. And then what happens between that, Rails db setup. I was working on some legacy Rails apps recently. So what happens between running the database setup commands and then when they are ready to go get a ticket? So you could start documenting those. There could be you could spin up a wiki in the repository that says once you're at the bottom of this README and you've got the Rails server running, and you can click around and see our data populating the environment or the application running locally. Go over here and create these, copy these templated Jira tickets, or request access to these, various environments. There's a bunch of process that needs to go, usually to get someone from access to the repository to able to be a full-scale contributor to the development team. And you could take a stab at writing those out. Either you or the engineer that's watching this that's excited to take this on, or when you just hire a new engineer, say these are send them to go watch this talk and say, we want to make our onboarding process better. Can you watch this and see what ideas crop up as you're onboarding? Next, I've often found application demos are pretty common on teams I've worked on. So once you have the app running locally, you'll screen share, or someone will kind of give you a tour of the application and show little gotchas and little tools and resources that are available to you. What about recording one of those? You can just hop on Zoom and record it, and try to move fairly quickly and keep an eye on making it a useful recording, and then stick that video on Wistia and embed it in your wiki. Now that one walkthrough that your engineer has done a bunch of times can be reused by others. And if that engineer is home or out sick or working on a different feature, it's still available. Finally, the last one is, what about finding a ticket, a recently done ticket that encapsulates a lot of the work to be done? What I mean by that is like, so let's say there's a feature that's coming through and an engineer works on it, builds it, ships it to production, and or like a bug fix. You can take that, just save the commit SHA somewhere, or like a link to the pull request, and then just write it and say, hey, next engineers, or the next engineer that joins, here's a really good feature that we built that kind of takes you through kind of end to end all of the pieces of the application. So what they do is they do git checkout, that SHA or the prior commit, and then they can practice rebuilding the commit and seeing like where the API endpoints, how those are handled, if it's dealing with endpoints, or how the front end is dealt with, how like all of the stuff inside of your application, if you just hand it to a new engineer inside of a pull request and say, spend a day understanding this, a lot of good things could come from that. Okay, so this is what I basically was saying. Slides are a little out of order. So this is basically just focusing on a time to first value. And when someone says it takes engineers 3 to 6 months to start delivering a lot of value, all I think of is 3 to 6 months. What's that other 3 months? Like, why not just say it takes 3 months and we know that confidently? Because 3 to 6 months sounds like someone's guessing and they don't have a lot of process in place. And that means that there's probably some value being left on the table, or there's opportunities to squeeze that time to first value shorter and shorter. And a lot of engineers, when they're first joining a team, they feel a lot of imposter syndrome, and all they want to do is feel confident that they're delivering value. So that comes back to the psychological conditions of meaningfulness, safety, and availability, and the engagement of the human spirit at work. This kind of effort being expended dignifies and is work done in advance of new hires. So you get to kind of like give them a little bit of a gift in this, and in doing so, good things happen. I'm not very good at graphs, so I basically, if your normal time to value, time moving forward takes this long, and someone by doing this work gets it to this long, half whatever that original value is, that's of tremendous value to the organization. So that should be tracked and measured and celebrated and rewarded. And when you do your quarterly OKRs and your end of year compensation adjustments, these are the kinds of things that can feed into that, and an organization can really reward and get a lot of value from. So better onboarding, this is just an example. It's not just that engineers onboard faster, but they start understanding the domain-specific logic of your application. And I don't just mean like RSpec DSL, but I mean all of the business of your application. If you deal with e-commerce, there's going to be a lot of very specific objects and patterns and messages inside of your application related to e-commerce, or payments or email or all sorts of things. As your onboarding gets better, you start getting closer and closer to the new hires really understanding the business. Maybe at some companies, I've seen people, when they start, they get their laptop and their whole setup, but they also get a book that's like, hey, here's 1 or 2 books that are about the domain that we do business in. And if you better understand that business, you can do better work as an engineer. Maybe not right off the bat, but eventually. For instance, insurance and finance and mortgages and home ownership and I'm just listing domains that I know have a lot of very intricate rules around them that if the engineers have a good understanding of, they can make like wiser and better decisions inside of the application. So you deal with the pain already of not being a welcoming enough place to early career software developers. I deal with this pain when new engineers have joined teams that I've been on. I've often wished I wish I had a better process that I could just kind of hand you this thing at the beginning and then just know that you will be moving confidently and learning a lot as you move through it this entire process. So we all, the room that would be full of people, deal with this pain because our companies that we work for can't hire enough early career engineers. So that hurts us. We've also all been early career engineers. Or we are early career engineers. So no matter where you sit on this issue, either you're an executive or you're a seasoned engineer or you're an early career engineer, you deal with this pain. So if you are the go-to onboarding person at your company, you have a lot of potential value to deliver here. If you're a team lead or a senior engineer, you or under your tutelage, maybe a different engineer on your team can start hacking away at this problem and see really substantial gains, I imagine, quickly. Or if you're an executive in the organization, if you just start talking about this, people will probably listen. In healthy organizations, leadership has a lot of sway. And so just by virtue of talking about something, you can kind of shape organizational priorities in that direction. Now, I care a lot about this as well, so you can always reach out to me, and I'd be happy to help. A lot of this came as basically I kept hearing from early career engineers that were getting rejected at roles because of this, and I was like, I'm tired of that. So this whole talk is kind of like a clinch-fisted protestation against that, these events that happen daily. Okay, so how does you and your company and your team benefit? I just want to recap. Faster time to first value when you focus on the experience of your early career engineers. You have a better and more reliable process around hiring new engineers, not just early career, but any engineer. You get a better engagement of your current engineering talent because it can be very satisfying to do this kind of work and help others in this way. A lot of engineers really want to help people, but depending on where you are in the organization and where the organization is relative to the industry and like the end user, a lot of engineers feel kind of segregated and far away from customers or the people they're trying to help. So this is an opportunity to kind of dust off, that desire and that opportunity. And then, so engagement of current engineering talent per this. It reduces the burden on your senior engineers when there's good bespoke company-specific resources that skill up the engineers on the team that are less skilled. Those senior engineers know that when they do work to improve others' skills, it's kind of made reusable and durable. And it makes legible these kinds of important themes for further improvement. Like I guarantee if your company starts thinking hard or your team starts thinking hard about the onboarding process and is able to get some organizational buy-in to make some wins around that, you'll see a lot of cool stuff come out of that. I wrote here in my speaker notes, more money. That can mean a lot of different things. That can look like better feature delivery, and so, winning market share, which is more money. That can look like your team spending less resources on like getting more engineering done out of your current payroll or your current team size. So that means that there's more money in budget or more money remaining in the budget for other things. And then if you're at the line level engineer, like these are the kinds of things that you can work into compensation discussions. And like all of those, like the engineer themselves can work with the company and be like, hey, here's the way I'm delivering a lot of value. Let's make sure the compensation stays like commensurate with that value. So everyone wins, or at least can win. Like I said, you're already feeling this pain. So start listening to it. See if you can start finding it a little bit more. So, all right. Lastly, you have more consistent hiring pipeline. Oh yeah, and if you can get like less skilled engineers more quickly to skilled engineers, that means that the engineers you're creating by virtue of hiring can now move to other places within the organization. Everyone benefits from that, can promote and hire within. And then you can know 6 months from now, a year from now, you can reach out and just hire a batch of early career engineers and know that they're all going to be successful. And that's like a really satisfying thing. As a CTO, you don't have to stay awake and think like, oh, what if our one really senior engineer leaves? There's less frustration across all groups. By highlighting this, the framework for identifying and solving onboarding problems, when they show up, just like now people know that when they're onboarding and they're doing something in their repository, something goes wrong or something's confusing or unclear, they can just make the PR. They can fix it themselves. They can add clarity themselves. You get happier engineers, better engineers. Again, the cost to not doing this: attrition, lost money, frustration, pain, and you're not future-proofing your engineering organization. Yeah. All right. Thanks for listening. I would love to hear from y'all wherever you sit in an organization. These are things I care a lot about and like to think about and hear from others about and create resources that can serve others about. So this is how to get in touch with me. I hope to meet all of you next year, the next Rails conference.